Welcome to Emotion Ships, where we talk about the real reason everything happens for a reason. I am your host, Charlie Carroll, along with my lovely co-host, Mallory Redmond. Mal, welcome to the show.
You know, my favorite one was cantankerous.
Cantankerous co-host, probably because it was the most accurate.
True. And it's just catchy. Hi, welcome.
Yes, how are you this morning?
I'm so good.
Welcome to all of you who are tuning in to episode 21. 21's a great number.
I love the number 21.
Me too. Why do you love it? And I'll tell you why I love it.
It was my high school boyfriend's favorite number.
Yikes!
So I don't know. I just took it on. I didn't have much of an identity in high school, so it was his favorite number, so it became my favorite number, and I just still love the number.
I can't take that one back.
Shout out to Matt, wherever you are.
Hey, Matt.
Great guy.
Whoa. All right, let's
Okay,
try to
why
recover from that one. Darren, wherever you are, don't worry about it. We'll work
It's
through this
fine.
too.
It's fine.
I'm born on December 21st.
Oh, yeah, birthday
Yes.
number.
And then also blackjack.
Oh, sure.
I enjoy playing blackjack, and 21 obviously is a great number for blackjack.
Have you seen the movie?
I have.
It's a good movie.
Yeah, it is a good movie because it's based on a true story.
That's true.
I try to count cards.
I'm sure you do.
Yeah, I'm okay at it.
Really?
Yeah, but you can't get super accurate with that, especially when you're playing 6 decks. Did you see
lost me there.
transitioning?
Okay.
Don't worry about it. Transitioning. AP came out with a poll today. Americans are unhappy. The unhappiest they have been in 50 years.
I mean, based on what?
Well, this is saying that in light of COVID-19 and how everyone has been disrupted, that this poll, this tracking study from NORC, the University of Chicago, found that 31% of Americans are unhappy.
I believe that, but I also don't know that it's...
Oh, wait.
Oh.
I apologize.
Oh.
31% was 2018. 2020 is 50%.
Oh, my.
50% of our population, ladies and gentlemen, are unhappy.
I mean, it has been I believe it.
Yeah.
It's been a little bit of a rough go. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
Socially, economically.
But that comes back to my question. One of the things that's tough about this is that word can be interpreted many different ways, and
Right.
it means different things to different people.
Yeah.
I asked that question, what makes a good day good? And I've been asking that for 5 to 10 years now because I think a lot of us don't know what makes a good day good. And so I'll just, wherever you are listening to this, answer that question for yourself. What makes a good day good? And often when I ask people that question, they cannot answer the question. And the danger in that is that we live our days wanting them to be good days, but we don't know what makes a good day good.
Is it a trick question?
No, it's not. It's not a trick question. And I think a lot of people start to feel like it's a trick question. But where I always try to bring people back to, or what I always try to bring people back to, is the absence of bad or tension or stress or adversity is not what makes a good day good.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the default, is a good day for me means that there was no bad in it. But that doesn't work. It can't work.
Yeah, my immediate answer, which says a lot about me, and I definitely should be in therapy,
Sure.
is productivity.
Yeah.
If I feel like I got a lot done, you know those days where you just can't feel like you can't like get going?
Yes.
There's just a lot of things happening and you don't feel like you've tied a bow on any of them. That's a bad day.
Yeah. But what's interesting about that, and for everyone listening, tune in here, is that's still a feeling. I have shared the same feelings before about, oh man, I just don't feel like today was productive, or I did not get the things that were on my list crossed off, and therefore I don't feel like it's been a good day.
Right.
But some of your most productive days are days that don't feel like you were productive. You never know when that one conversation
Yeah.
or that one action is going to unlock a series of dominoes and things are going to fall in place, though you did not feel like it. And that really comes back to just what we're talking about with this question, what makes a good day good, is you've got to be really careful because it's not feelings. It's not about your feelings and how you feel about it as to what makes a good day good, which, going back to episode, I think it was 2 and 3 or 3 and 4, here on Emotion Ships, the podcast, living with this 20-mile march where you have clearly mapped out, here are the things that I need to do. Here are the 4 things that I need to do 5 days a week in order to be happy 20 years from now. Like, you're never going to look back, 20 years from now and say, man, I am so disappointed I ate the way I wanted to eat and put life into my body 5 days a week. Or I've never heard anyone say, man, I sure did waste a lot of time working out 5 days a week. Or, oh man, it sucks that I lived by my schedule and I controlled my schedule versus letting it control me 5 days a week.
So how come then I can't say that a good day is productivity?
Well,
Because I can say I did my 20-mile march.
well, you definitely can say that a good day is feeling productive, but it's a little tricky because sometimes you don't feel productive, though
You might be productive.
that day was just a part of an overall greater thing, a greater a step in the right direction.
I'm with you. So that's a pretty depressing poll.
Well, I would say it's probably accurate, and it just comes down to, I think a lot of people feel as if they have to feel good about their life and they have to feel good about things in order to be going in the right direction. But what's interesting or ironic about that is often if your life is going in the right direction, it doesn't always feel great.
Right.
Because you need adversity in order to grow and become stronger.
Yeah. I would be curious to continue to follow the trend of that poll because what was that?
It's an alien.
Okay. Because my hunch is that social media has a lot to do with
Oh, no doubt.
the increase in unhappiness.
No doubt about it.
And so COVID or not, or whatever, all of the things happening or not, I would probably put money on that number continuing to increase over the years, just as we're online more, right?
Yes. Now, here's something that is interesting on thehill.com. Fauci, why the public wasn't told to wear masks when the coronavirus pandemic began. The infectious disease expert lied, supposedly, because there were not enough masks. Which
that doesn't seem like a great reason to lie.
I think is interesting because I definitely noticed that in that original 60-minute interview, he was saying that only professionals needed to wear them, that a healthy person did not, and then the narrative changed. And this is a great point in regard to Emotion Ships, the podcast. When we say the real reason everything happens for a reason, there are often so many things happening behind the scenes to any given manifestation or decision or communication in this sense, that you never know what is actually going on. And so the attempt of Emotion Ships, the podcast, is to help create an awareness in you, our listener, as we go on this journey ourselves, to be aware of that often there are things happening behind the scenes that are making what's happening happen. And so that's why we say the real reason everything happens for a reason, because often people attribute everything to a higher power or to God when there actually is explainable, tangible things that are driving outcomes. And so everything that happens cannot be explained away as, oh, well, it happened, and so it must have happened for a reason, as if we do not have a lot of say-so or ability to change the direction of our life and get it going. getting it going, getting going.
Just like this sentence.
Oh yeah.
Getting it going.
In the right direction.
Yeah. I also think it, like the awareness, I was thinking about this yesterday when I was driving, that not only, does this entire conversation about emotionships have to do with God and, just that spiritual side of why things happen. But it also, for me, it takes me off the hook a little bit, where it's like, not everything's about me.
Sure.
Like the way that person just treated me could have nothing to do with me, right? I was thinking about it because I saw a minivan cut off a truck, and I was like, whoa, and then they were all angry about each other. But like, that has nothing to do with the two drivers, right? Like, who knows what that person's day has held. And so I just think that emotionships, it is a reminder that it's not all about me.
No, exactly. And there are a lot of things that you don't need to interpret personally.
Right.
I too was driving yesterday.
Oh, weird.
Wild thing. And I was on a 2-lane road, and I was headed my direction. And in the other lane, a truck with a young man sped around the person that was in front of him. So he is in my lane. And you can tell he's driving really wild.
Yeah.
And he cuts it really close. I slowed down so he would not hit me. And I just honked at him, right? Like, gave him this, like, hey, watch what you're doing kind of honk. Not an angry honk, that's longer than 3 seconds. This was just kind of a second and a half type thing. And he very quickly, like he was prepared for it, stuck his hand out the window and flicked me off. And I thought to myself, speaking of an emotion chip, that is energy in motion.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
And so I had a choice whether or not I took it personally and received that energy, and therefore it would alter me through anger or frustration or giving it back to him, or I could just let it go. Like,
that's a great example.
That guy is dealing with his own stuff today. Who knows what he is late for? Maybe he's just really immature. Who knows? But I can acknowledge it and let it go, or I can receive it and pass it on to those around me.
Right.
There was another family situation in the Carroll family yesterday where some people were angry at one another. And we had an opportunity, Amy and I had an opportunity to absorb it and let it stress us out and get our immediate home in an uproar, or just acknowledge, like, that's their stuff. If they need help, they'll ask. But we're not going to live underneath that pressure or receive it and start making it our own, and therefore let that energy and motion come into our home.
Yeah, it's a great example. That's exactly what I'm saying. Thank you. Good
job, Mal.
That was great. That worked well.
Last little bit in the news. You remember a couple of weeks ago I told you about my dream of 3 things, and I was very cautious to say, I don't know how accurate this is, and I'm working through it myself.
Wait, no. Say more.
Well, I had a dream probably 5 or 6 weeks ago now that COVID-19 was a wave.
Oh, yes. You told me. I didn't think that was a dream. I thought it was just a thought during the day. Okay, whatever. It doesn't matter. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I had this picture that I would just describe as like in dream-like form. And it was 3 waves. And the first wave was COVID-19. And there was no explanation to it. It's just like a picture I saw. And what caught my attention was that there were 3 of these waves. And I explained it to you and a number of other leaders that meet, every week, just saying that I wasn't sure about it, but I was trying to interpret what it meant or what it could mean. And I was asking the group to just be aware of it and to meditate and to pray. And not long after that picture of 3 waves, everything happened with George Floyd and then the protests. And the idea was, what the picture communicated to me was that, and then what I felt like I heard or interpreted in that picture was that these waves were going to be progressive in what they did to the country, from just getting more intense type of thing. And so then after COVID-19, George Floyd and society's in an uproar. And then this morning, I opened the Drudge report, and again, if you're listening, I'm not trying to freak anybody out, and I don't know that this is the case or not, right? I'm just telling something that I saw in a dreamlike form, and I interpreted these three waves as things that get more intense. Well, what is today?
Oh
Today
my
is
gosh. Can you just tell us what you saw?
today is the 17th. Just getting a good bookmark here.
Okay.
And I opened Drudge, and it says, new outbreak at China Market. Schools shut, flights halted, residents rounded up. Wartime mode. Here we go again.
That's
Well,
the headline?
that's the headline. It just jogged.
I did see that it's China, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, that the schools shut down, that they're kind of going through it again.
It just jogged my memory of this three wave picture that I saw, and I hope that is not the case, that it is not the third and final and therefore most intense wave, but just very interesting to me that I saw this report in light of what I felt like I saw as a picture. And so, of course, I will be praying about it and praying through it, but I just thought that it was interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there's not much else we can do, right?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it comes back to some of what we were saying in episode 19 and 20 about being the justice that you want to see in the world. You can't always control what happens to you, but you can control your response to it.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, getting back to the idea of what makes a good day good, you can make every day a good day in the sense that you did your best to respond to what was put in front of you.
Right. Last night we had probably we don't have this very often, poop in the bathtub.
Oh.
It wasn't me or my husband. It was our youngest.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yes. But it was just mass chaos, right? Like Evie's screaming, everybody's screaming. And there's
So one sister dropped a bomb on the other sister.
She wasn't in, they weren't both in the tub at the same time, but it was almost bedtime. It was nighttime.
That scares me.
It was rough.
Yeah, poop in the tub scares me.
Oh my gosh, yes, it's a mess. But Darren and I are committed to just riding the waves of parenthood.
Yes.
Right? And so you have to laugh through it.
I had no idea where you were going with that.
You just have to, I'm speaking to like, what a terrible situation potentially. Like
Sure.
It's disgusting and everybody's unhappy, but you have to laugh. At some point you just have to laugh.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
For sure. Well, we cannot prevent certain things from happening to us, but we can work on our attitude and our response underneath that pressure or in the midst of that uncertainty. If this is your first time listening to Emotion Chips, the podcast, one of the things that we say about stress is that it can all be brought back to one word, and that word is uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And I think this poll, with 50% of the general public being unhappy, probably comes back to that one word, which is uncertainty.
Yeah.
It brings me back to a conversation I had this past week with an employee at Body Garage Dayton. We were talking about just working through the frustration of personal growth, mm-hmm. and not letting the challenges that you come up against overwhelm you, which is a very real thing.
Oh, that's super legit. Yeah.
Just that everyone that is healthy wants to grow. But often we do not recognize or acknowledge that depending upon the rate I want to grow at and the strength that I want to take on, that really determines the resistance that we need in our life in order to grow at that pace or to be that person. Mm-hmm. And because of movies and social media and celebrity culture and all of those things, we all want that epic, unexplainable life. But often we don't realize what it takes from a resistance and from an uncertainty standpoint to get there. Yeah. It's epic resistance and overwhelming circumstances or challenges that can't be explained, like a level of challenge that can't be explained. that forces us to develop and to get there.
Yeah.
And very rarely do we know what we're asking for when we declare that we want to be a person that changes the world.
It sure does sound good.
I've heard a couple of things, and people have shared some Elon Musk stories here with me recently that, I'll just give rough numbers, but it's out there on social media that, he made 180 million from the transaction with PayPal, that he was an early guy in PayPal, or one of the original investors or inventors of PayPal, and he made 180 million, and he put 100 million into Tesla and 50 million into SpaceX, and then another 30 million into something else, and said that he was borrowing money to pay rent. And it sounds like a wild thing, but that's not an uncommon thing because of his belief in what he was doing. And so can you imagine having $180 million and doubling down on it and investing it in things that you think can change the world to the extent that you have to borrow money to pay your rent?
Is that a typical storyline?
I think so.
Wow.
I mean, it's the personality involved in, and I just say that to say that, if you're out there and you have this sense of eternity in your heart, which is what we're told, King Solomon said this in the wisdom literature of the Old Testament, that all of us have eternity in our heart. And I think the healthier that we are, we sense that, and we want to do something bigger than what's here on this world. Like, we really want our name and our breath to outlive, or we want our life to outlive our breath. Mm-hmm. And what we don't talk enough about is you're going to really need to experience some adversity and some hard times in order to be that person or to get there. You need an epic level of resistance to develop an epic level of brilliance. And we just don't talk about that enough. And so when 50% of the people in our culture or in our country say that they're unhappy, it's because we're experiencing unprecedented times of uncertainty, right? But the good news about that is that can forge greatness in us. That I saw this morning that Jocko, I believe it's Willard, was on Joe Rogan's podcast. Am I getting the last name right?
I don't know.
You can look it up.
Yeah.
But he was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and we'll throw this in the Willink. There you go, Jocko Willink. He was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and one of the things that I've taken from Jocko is this idea of the one word good, right? And you can find it on YouTube, his video about good, that he's just like, oh, we're experiencing unprecedented levels of uncertainty. Good. Things flipped upside down, and now I'm experiencing a very hard thing this morning. Good. I had a very close friend that turned their back on me. Good. And he just uses this word good for almost everything because he knows, and he's an advocate for, we need that resistance and that stress, that uncertainty, if we're going to grow and become the person that we want to become.
So how do you, what do you tell those in your businesses or that you are interacting with when they are facing the uncertainty? Like, how do you know when you're, like, what you're up against is what you should be up against? And how do you, and how do you know when you need to turn the other way? Like, well, like you're going in the wrong direction, that this resistance it's either resistance for growth or like it's a wall. Like, you're not supposed to keep going in that direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's all the same coin, right? And let's just break it down into two sides of the same coin. Your ignorance, right, or selfishness can cause you to make decisions that create pain in your life. But as long as you have a teachable spirit and you're willing to learn, that's okay. You're allowed to make mistakes out of ignorance, immaturity, or selfishness as long as you're willing to learn from them. So that's one side of the coin. I'm making these decisions. I didn't know any better, or I kind of had something in my gut that told me not to do it. I did it anyways, and bam, now I'm experiencing the painful consequences of it. As long as you're teachable and you're willing to learn and change because of that, that's still great stuff. Don't beat yourself up about it. The people that take twice as long to get to where they're going are the people that sulk and sit in their own junk. They make a mistake. They kind of knew that they shouldn't do it. They did it anyways. And now they pout, thinking that they're going to use pouting or that somehow pouting pays for their sins. Pouting doesn't pay for your sins. It just wastes time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the first side of the coin. Like, oops, in my immaturity or selfishness or hard-headedness, I made this decision, though I knew I shouldn't, and now I'm paying for it. That's fine. Learn from it and get going. Don't spend your time pouting or sulking in that. Just get going. That's the first side. The second side of the coin is a little more productive, and that is I'm going uphill and I'm taking on something that nobody has taken on before, or I'm just learning a new competence and it's really rough for the first 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
And so that's a different kind of resistance. Like, I started my own business and I'm learning things that I never knew, right? I'm making decisions and, it's just hard.
Right.
I'm working through things. And so both of those are the same coin. It's just different sides. And it comes back to, spend your time in meditation in the morning, get some reflection time in the evening so you can process the decisions you made and the results you got from it. But, failure, it doesn't really exist unless you're unwilling to learn or unwilling to try. That's really the only way that failure exists. And so in the example of this conversation that I was having with an employee at Body Garage Dayton, which is a wellness boutique for those that are unaware of it, I was just saying that she was expressing to me that she was frustrated because she's been at the garage as a motion mechanic for a while, and an employee came in after her, and she feels like that employee jumped her in her competence and some of the things that she's doing. And so in her own growth process, she was fighting the temptation to become overwhelmed and feel like she's being left behind. And one of the things that I said to her, and I could only say it to her because I've had to coach myself through this, is sometimes you started at a distance that was further away or further down in a hole or in the basement, and that means your ceiling can be higher in the overall journey, but it just takes longer for you to get there. I stumbled upon this about 15 years ago, maybe 14 years ago, when our oldest son, who just got his driver's permit or his temps this past week, which is crazy, never wanted to go into Sunday school with his peers, that he was scared half to death. And what I learned was that based on personality traits and how someone is wired, they can see or feel more of the energy that is going on in the room and therefore don't want to do certain things. They're more afraid. Whereas some children, based on how they're wired, you sit them down in the middle of the room, give them, their applesauce or whatever you're going to give them and walk away, and they're fine and they never miss their parents and they don't care. And it's just because they're wired differently. And so the same is true of us based on how we're wired and how we're made, but then also what we've been subject to in our life. And so sometimes when you have childhood trauma or you've been subjected to more fearful things or tougher situations, you start at a deeper place. But the good news to that is you have more floors, and it might take you longer to get to where you want to go, but you're going to have a deeper experience and therefore be able to influence more people because you started in a deeper and darker place. And for those that are struggling with darkness and anxiety and frustrations and depression and suicidal tendencies, they need people that have been there before that can speak to that, but now are on the roof or on one of the top floors and can say, hey, here's how I did it. And so we've got to change the way we think. And I was just encouraging her, like, you know, you are in the right place. Just because it's taking longer doesn't mean that you're in a less of a position. It's actually the opposite.
So one thing that I think about is if you're that, because I feel like I've been that person before, right? Where I've been working at something for a long time and somebody else kind of swoops in and it feels like they surpass me really fast and I get discouraged or down on myself. And the temptation is like, well, maybe this thing isn't for me then. Maybe there's something else that I should be doing. And so you don't stick with it, whatever
Sure.
whatever the career path or the passion, whatever it is. How do you know if you should be sticking with it?
Well, I think one of the reasons why we're advocates for the 20-mile march, which includes a time of withdrawal each and every day, is you've got to slow down enough to sense that you're being led and you're being guided. And often that sense of grace or that you're being guided, if we're going slow enough, can be stronger than what we're up against. And so almost like, and I know I can't use too many Star Wars analogies here with you.
Not with me, but I'm sure our listeners love it.
Yeah, we need to get that corrected for you. But it's almost like Star Wars, and you've got Yoda, speaking to you about the Force, and it's like you're up against all of this resistance. But though the Force is silent and quiet or very gentle, it's greater than whatever you're up against. And so, if you're not tempted to quit what you're doing, you're not doing the right thing, right? Like that's just
interesting.
That's a part of taking on something that's bigger than you and achieving things that are bigger than you. If you're in the right area, you've got to feel like quitting at times. And I think, that's one of the things with successful people that's really the differentiator is they just did not quit.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel bad for the people that associate resistance with quitting or changing their direction because they never get anywhere. It's like when I was little, they had these wind up cars that you'd either pull back and let them go and they would go, or you would wind them up and then take this little key out and it would get going. And when it hit a wall, it would just change directions, and then it would hit another wall, and then it would change directions, and then it would hit another wall until it ran out of gas.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't tell you, out of my peers that are entrepreneurs, I can't tell you how many I have seen that hit a wall and automatically change directions when that wall was there on purpose to help grow them and get them to go deeper.
Right.
To create value in their life.
But there has to be some, maybe it's just not the majority of the time, but there has to be times where the seed is planted in the wrong environment, right? Like
Sure.
there is a different calling for the person. And I think that's...
Yeah, no doubt about it. But listen, it's kind of like the analogy of the two sides of the same coin. I often talk about Angry Birds. You remember the app Angry Birds?
Yes.
It's so like fulfilling to pull back the catapult or the slingshot.
I never played it.
Oh, you need to. And launch the bird across the screen to destroy things. It's wonderful. You need to try it.
Oh my gosh.
The group that created that app, that was like number 57 or 54. And all of the ones prior to that led to that best-selling app that made them multimillionaires.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, like, of course, you're going to get planted in a different place. But what I've noticed with my own life is that it's a series of wrong experiences or different avenues or different streets that gave me the competence to do what I eventually ended up doing. And so, opening up a restaurant, there are things in the first 4 years, we're getting ready to celebrate our 4-year anniversary. there are a lot of things looking back on it that cost, tens of thousands of dollars that I would not do now.
Mm-hmm.
But I can only say that now because I did it then. And so you've got to believe in the coordination of coincidences to get where you're going. Like doing your best and being led is part of it. And if you are guided and God allows you to exist in all of these different areas, like I was coaching soccer for a long time and actually moved back to Dayton to coach at the university with the women's program and thought that that's what I would do for years.
Yeah.
But little did I know, coaching and dealing with, I was coaching in South Carolina before I moved back to Dayton, and I was coaching a club that had a lot of wealthy parents that were doctors and politicians and business owners that had a lot of money, and managing those personalities because I was coaching their precious little gems, like prepared me for leading businesses and doing other things. I mean,
Sure.
I started a indoor training facility in South Carolina, and I knew I should not have done it. I was on the way to closing to this 50,000 square foot training facility, and I knew I was not supposed to do it. And I signed the document and did it anyways. And I moved 2.5 years later and had to give it to a friend and lose a lot of time and a lot of money on it because I did something that I knew I was not supposed to do. But the truth of the matter is that taught me something. I remained open. I didn't beat myself up too bad, and I moved on from it.
Mm-hmm.
And though I didn't get the return I wanted, and though I wasted some dollars, I grew a heck of a competence about what I should and should not do, and the price of what happens when you do what you're not supposed to do. At the same time, I was inventing a training aid for soccer, and it fell through, and I've got 10,000 pieces of it now that have never been sold. I think they never went to market, or in the limited way that was unsuccessful that they did go to market is because my energy was divided at that time and I had started that facility.
Yeah.
And so there's a price to everything,
Right.
but if you remain open and continue to learn, then you're okay. And that's just going to roll into your that competence is going to roll into your next opportunity.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I want to talk more about the basement that you were speaking about, and
Yeah.
how, you were talking about it a lot in terms of like past darkness and childhood trauma. Can you build out your own basement, or is it something that's sort of built for you based on your experiences?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I don't want to build out my own basement, right? If you believe that God exists and that the nature of God is good, and like, a good parent, they're trying to do things for their children that don't seem good to their child at the time, but turns out to be great if they'll just go along with it. That is the nature of God that I have experienced, is that he really is trying to lead us into, and this is what we're told in the gospel that the Apostle John wrote, that God is really trying to set us up for good things that we could not achieve in and of ourselves, that he is leading us to good things through these challenges and these challenging paths that in some way forge this basement for us. And that's why we're told that, in Romans, that all things work together for good to those who love him and are called according to his purpose. Meaning, if you can, by faith, believe that God is trying to set you up, that will give you the strength to push through the discipline and the adversity that he allows to come into our life, to chisel out that basement, which in return grows a higher ceiling. At some point in time, you can't get a higher ceiling or a higher roof. You've got to dig out the bottom floors. And so, yes, you do have something to do with that, the shaping and the forming of that basement. But really what it comes down to is just managing and owning our attitude and our responses about the hard things that we come up against. A lot of it is out of our control,
Mm-hmm.
what actually comes our way.
Mm-hmm.
But we can control our response and our attitude about adversity.
Well, it sounds like a lot of it too goes back to the word that we often come back to in our episodes of awareness, where like maybe we all do have a basement, but some of us just don't want to see what's down there. Well, right? Like it's the kind of thing where you talk a lot about the good old days, right? So yes, you look back on your past and your childhood and it's all good, because you don't want to see what was the resistance, or you don't want to face it, and you don't want to have to work through it. And so you're not going down to the basement.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, again, the brain is made in a way that it doesn't want any uncertainty. Your brain actively works to get rid of uncertainty. And believe it or not, worry and anxiety is a method or is an approach by the brain to create control. So you experience something that is out of your control, and the brain goes, okay, I'm going to help you worry about this because you can choose to worry. And what the brain thinks, or if we let our brain have its way, it will constantly get stuck running these security assessments or these threat assessments. And in doing so, it's a form of control. Well, I can't control what happens to me, but I can control continuing to think about it and what could happen and what if this happens or what if this happens. And that's a manifestation trying to comfort us. Like worry is a form of faith that things are not going to work out. And if I think about it a little bit more, maybe I can come up with a solution and get rid of this. Yeah. And so I don't think that we tend to process the basement or the hard times as something that is good and positive, but the basement and the hard times in our life have to exist if we want a higher, taller, better experience. And so what I was saying, in finishing up the conversation with my friend and this employee is that, the way you need to think about it is answers. More problems, more answers. The more problems I am benefited to experience, the more answers I can come up with. Answers is what gets you paid in life. The more answers you have. And having a lot of answers doesn't make me who I am. It just qualifies me to help more people. And so I said, you want answers, but you can't have answers without problems. More problems, more answers. And she said, more problem or more money, more problems, right? Like just the adage, which was a song, I think in the 90s or early 2000s, more money, more problems.
Yes, I'm with you.
But I said the opposite. It's the opposite is true. It's more problems, more money. As long as your problems don't kill you, and as long as you do not allow your problems to overwhelm you, the more problems you have in your life, the more answers you will have. And the more answers you have, the better chance you have at making more money to help more people with those same problems.
Yeah, that's good.
It is more problems, more money. It is not more money, more problems.
It could be more money, more problems.
Well, if you think that money makes you who you are, or that money is the end all be all. I was just telling someone this morning at table 33 that my grandfather, who passed about 4 years ago, said to me that when he was a broke college student cutting hair on the side to make money, he worried less about money than when he became a millionaire.
I believe it 100%. Isn't that wild?
Well, it's the thing that most people don't experience or cannot learn because they don't have $1 million. But with more money comes an opportunity to worry about more things. It's more to be protected. But in this case, when it comes to your growth, whoever is listening, it's important to understand that the more problems you have, as long as you do not allow them to overwhelm you or to frustrate you or to sink you, the more answers you will have. And the more answers you will have, the more valuable you will be to your friends, family, and community.
So we may have covered this in past episodes, but it's relevant here. Can you give a couple of practical just pieces of advice for when you are in the midst of uncertainty or stress? Like, I think back to earlier in this episode when you read that headline about China and talked about the third waves. Like, I could feel, we don't even have like live listeners, but I could feel the future listeners like feeling that,
Yeah.
right? Like feeling that uncertainty, that stress, that like what's about to hit, what's about to come. So what do you do in the midst of the uncertainty? Like just even to center yourself so that you can stay in the game to get the answers.
Yeah, I think part of it starts with just an overall disposition that acknowledges that everybody that goes through life will experience these things and that they're out of our control. If you start with acknowledging that these kinds of things can happen, and really when you look at the history of the world, right? Like take world history and the history of humanity. Things like COVID-19 and pandemics and disease and world wars are more common than not. If you're living in America, if you're listening to this and you're living in America and you've been around for the last 50 to 75 years, you're the exception. There has never been a softer group of people than the people that are living in the United States of America over the last 50 years. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, but the history of humanity, we talked last week in episode 20, like slavery was the norm. It's the norm. It's the overwhelmingly norm in world history. And so we're living in this period of time, especially in the United States, where we're starting to see things because of tech and communication and transportation and a world economy that we've never seen before. And our generation has been fortunate not to have the World War I or II type experience, though I don't want to take anything away from the individuals or the families that have lost someone in the Middle East, what's been going on in the Middle East for the last, 20 years. And so that being said, like when it comes to grounding myself, I've got to get a good historical perspective and understand that life can be very difficult and death is not an uncommon thing. And then it comes back to like, can I embrace and understand that could be norm? I can't control it, even if I worry about it, but I can control my response to it. And so for me, that's why that time of withdrawal in the 20-mile march is so important, that I need to learn how to withdraw in order to remind myself of these priorities and live by my beliefs versus my feelings. Yeah. And listen, whether you get your beliefs and your feelings under control or whether you allow your beliefs to dominate your feelings does not matter in the sense that this stuff is coming. If you're alive and you have a heartbeat, this stuff is coming, and all you can do is control your response to it. Jesus said it this way. He said the rain falls on the just and unjust, right? It can't just fall on the unjust. I'm getting rained on because I'm cheating on my wife. It doesn't work that way. The rain falls on the just and the unjust. And as history plays out, these are things that we're going to experience. And all we can do is remind ourselves of our beliefs and that life is happening for us versus to us, and make the most of each and every situation.
Yeah.
But that doesn't happen if we cannot take the time to formulate and figure out what our beliefs are, number one, and two, we don't create a regular time of withdrawal, reminding ourselves of what we believe, because our feelings are just too strong. They'll dominate us. They'll kick our butt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely something that each person has to take ownership of, right? Like nobody can do this for you. And I think it's particularly important if you live in a household or you work very closely with someone who like is very stressed all the time, right? Like because like you were saying with you and Amy and like the family situation, like you guys had to actively choose not to let that kind of invade your home, like the conflict that's happening.
I told another employee yesterday that it takes a lot of work to not let what's outside inside.
Yeah, sure.
Now, I want to let what's inside outside, but I don't always want to let what's outside, especially other people's junk and stress. I don't want to let what's out in. And that takes a level of awareness where I am aware of what comes into the room, and I just acknowledge it, and then I let it go. And acknowledging it can be enough.
Yeah.
last but not least, we are going to create an episode based off of your questions. I said last week that I'm changing my cell phone number, and I wanted to give it to those of you that are listening. I will give this to you again, and we are going to create an episode just off of your questions. Daggone it, text me. 937-303-4788. If you listen to this episode and you like it, please share it. But then also don't forget to text me, 937-303-4788. Even if I know you really, really well and you're expecting a personal text from me telling you my number is going to change, it ain't coming. You need to text me and I'll get you plugged in so I don't lose you.
It's great.
Ladies and gentlemen, episode 21.
You're thinking about my high school boyfriend?
Yeah. Matt?
Good guy. This one was for you, Matt.
I'm speechless.